Great. Well, as people continue to trickle in, we'll get started.
Okay.
My name is Natasha Ritzma, and I'm the director of the Shingothi Center. I'm pleased to welcome you to our first Zoom at Noon program. Please continue to check our website as we plan to add more programs. This is the first of 3 artist and curator conversations we have planned for this semester. A couple of housekeeping items. We will be recording this session and we will post the full recording on our virtual experiences page on our website. Please feel free to type in any questions at any time during the conversation, and we'll share the questions with our panelists at the end of the program. I'd like to thank my colleague, Laura Santoyo, for handling the logistical and technical aspects of this program. I would also like to thank Doug Stapleton, the Associate Curator of Art at the Illinois State Museum, for bringing figurism to the Shingothi Center and for facilitating this conversation. Finally, I would like to thank Riva Lehrer for graciously taking the time to speak with us the week before her book is launching. We really, really appreciate it. And I am honored that Riva has agreed to be our first Zoom at Noon guest artist. And I will now ask Doug to formally introduce her.
Thank you. And I'm going to attempt to share a screen here. Actually, Laura, if you will unshare, I will. Thank you. And I will, let's see if we can get this going here. Hi, I'm Doug Stapleton. Can you see that? Zoom at Noon with Riva Lehrer. Is that showing up?
Oh, there I am.
Hey! So I'm Doug Stapleton, Associate Curator of the Illinois State Museum, and it's my pleasure to talk with Riva, have this conversation around the piece that she has in the figurism exhibition, and also talk to her about her work, and her extraordinary work, body of work, and hopefully at the end of the conversation, as Natasha had said, we'll have some time. If there's any questions that you want to put into the chat, please do. A couple other things as well. As I give an introduction about Riva, Laura's going to put some resources in the chat, links that you can go to, Riva's website, her the publisher for her book, and also some interviews, her New York Times op-ed piece that she did. Several resources you may want to explore, because Riva's career as an artist and as a writer and as a thinker is pretty astounding, and also very, I just had the pleasure this past week of delving deeply back into her work. So I encourage all of you to do that. And also, as we go along, as images come up on the screen, we'll put some verbal descriptions in the chat for the pieces as well. So I want to go ahead and introduce Riva, the more formal introduction, then hopefully the rest of this will be a little bit more informal. Riva Lehrer is an artist, a writer, and curator who focuses on the socially challenged body. She is best known for representations of people whose physical embodiment, sexuality, or gender identity have been long stigmatized. Riva's work has been seen in many venues, including the National Portrait Gallery of the Smithsonian, Yale University, United Nations, the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C., the Arnott Museum, the De Cordova Museum, the Frye Museum, the Chicago Cultural Center, and the Illinois State Museum. And she has had, rightly so, many awards and grants. Top among those, in 2017, a 3 Arts McDowell Fellowship for Writing. In 2015, a 3 Arts Residency Fellowship at the University of Illinois. Carnegie Mellon Fellowship at Haverford and Bryn Mawr Colleges in 2014. Prairie Fellowship at the Ragdale Foundation in 2009. And also one of my favorite grant titles, Critical Fierceness Grant in 2009.
Everybody loves that one.
What's that?
Everybody loves that one.
I know, it's a great,
tiny little grant, but everybody loves that one.
Why not call it what it is? Critical Fierceness. And many other 3 Arts Foundation grants, win Newhouse Award for Excellence, as well as grants from the Illinois Arts Council and National Endowment for the Arts. And very exciting is that her memoir, Gollum, Girl will be published by One World Imprint of Penguin Random House in October of 2020. And she is represented by the Regal Hoffman and Associates Literary Agency in New York City. So, and also Riva is an amazing instructor, teacher, mentor. She's on the faculty of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and is an instructor in Medical Humanities Department of Northwestern University. So welcome, Riva. Hello.
I sound so impressive.
I know you do.
Like, jeez.
You are. I have to say I've been a little nervous about this, just because because I want to apologize. If I say something wrong, correct me, please, just to start off. But I wanted to start off with, we have this exhibition that the museum sent to Shingothi Center at Aurora University. This is all at Aurora, if you're not aware of that. And it's figurative work from our permanent collection, which spans about 100 years. And its subtitle is something about the narrative and sort of fantastic figure in Illinois art. And I put those two together in the title because of so much of the historic and contemporary and modern work by Illinois figurative artists really use the body as a narrative tool. And there's historically this relationship to, you might want to say, the fantastic, surrealism, existentialism, people like the Monster Roster or the later like Harry who really deal with a metaphorical figure that is, as one art critic referred to, the body under stress. And Riva, as a portrait artist, primarily working with real people, still involves this, uses this body to its full narrative capacity. And I think that's important, the capacity of the body to speak. The piece that's on the screen right now is the piece that's in our collection that's in that exhibition from 2004, If Body Dress. And I've paired it with a piece that I pulled from, I think, some different writings of yours that have come up. This first sentence about the body is the first story, our text of first meetings. And what I wanted to ask you about, I'm doing all this talking here, but I want you to speak, Riva, is in some of the earlier interviews and writings, you talked about this body of work you were thinking around this time called, I think it was called Ghost Parade, about the images, the dreams, the aspirations, the hopes we carry around who we want to be, and then how they do or may not come to fruition or come, match up with who we are in our adult lives. So how does If Body Dress fit into that? Was this part of that Ghost Parade thinking, or was this, because this is sort of coming after your circle stories, your initial body of portraiture that you were doing around people with disability. What can you tell us about this piece, your thoughts now looking back on this piece and what you were thinking about then?
Well, Ghost Parade is sort of a loose term for many of my self-portraits. It didn't quite start with this one, but I guess it congealed with this one. So what I was thinking about is that in our society, we're continually pushed to want to be other than we are. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, about, particularly lately, about the commodification of desire, and that the way that our society is always giving us some kind of model, saying that this is what beauty is, this is what it means to be male, this is what it means to be female, this is the epitome of male and female, this is what you should be modeling your aspirations on. And yet what it does, and this is where the part of the commodification comes in, is that as I've been saying lately, like, let's say one year it's Scarlett Johansson, and the next year it's Beyonce, and the next year it's, I have not been seeing movies very much lately, so I keep losing track of who's hot, but like throughout, you know, I don't know, Miley Cyrus, what's her name? The other blonde who's like the big,
Oh, Britain, I don't know, don't even ask me, I'm totally.
I don't know, anyway, you get, like, the point is that even if one year you get to figure out exactly how to look, forgive me, I'm having some lung problems this morning.
Mhm.
I may have to step away in a second.
Mhm.
Let's say you figure out how to look like Taylor Swift, and you really nail looking like Taylor Swift. Well, in a few months or a year, they're going to be told that you're supposed to look like Scarlett Johansson. And then, you know, you'll be told that you're supposed to look like Beyonce. And then you're supposed to, you know, and then you're supposed to look like, God, I'm losing everybody's names right now. Anyway, the point is that whether you're male or female or whatever your gender identity is, even if you accomplish getting to look exactly like whatever that means, the paradigm of the moment, it will shift within months, because not only do we crave novelty, our economy is, and this is only part of Ghost Parade, but our economy is based on keeping us unstable, keeping us dissatisfied with our lives, with our belongings, and with our desires. So even if we're not being told, I mean, if you're a cis straight man, you probably don't think that you're supposed to look like Taylor Swift, but you might be told that you're supposed to want Taylor Swift. And to get Taylor Swift, you're supposed to look like this guy, and you're supposed to have these belongings, you're supposed to have these clothes, and you're supposed to be able to take your date to this location. And that's just as unstable as who you're supposed to look like. Who you're supposed to desire is also unstable. So what this does is put you into a constant cycle of commodification. So accomplishing looking like, or accomplishing being able to attract the desired object of the moment is always monetary, right? It's about clothing, it's about cars, it's about gym memberships and food, and, you know, knowing where's hot, knowing what's chic, knowing what the right music is. Like, the list is always goes back to trying to be the attractive model of the moment. It's rarely really about what you love, at least in terms of advertising. Advertising doesn't really care what you love. Advertising cares about making you love something. So, so that's the first dislocation, is that even if we're compliant and we accomplish what we're being told, it's going to be something else, and you're going to have to do it all over again, right? That's what fashion is. And then at the same time, as soon as we're in a situation where we are dissatisfied or worse with our bodies, in a state of shame with our bodies, that is a body that's going to follow us around. And then there's the body that you thought you were going to be. Maybe growing up, you thought you were going to look a particular way, or you thought that you were going to have a certain capacity, and maybe that's not who you ended up being. So there's that body. And then there's the body that maybe you're afraid you're going to be. So maybe you're afraid in terms of weight or aging or disease or height, or, you know, whatever it is, the expectation of who you're afraid you're going to end up as. And so we end up with this train following us around of these invisible ghosts that prevent us from living in the body that we have, coming to terms with it, loving it, embracing it, and not constantly wishing to be other.
Mhm.
So that's the Ghost Parade. It's the collision between what society is constantly like making us eject out of our bodies, And then all of our longings and disappointments, you know, maybe it's about who we used to be. Maybe we used to have a certain kind of body and we've lost it. And that's another one that, you know, like I used to be a lot cuter 20 years ago. I didn't know it at the time, but I was. I wish someone had told me. Didn't realize. And that's it. Like I look at pictures of myself from 20 years ago. I was something like cute, you know, never a beauty, but I hated myself because I was in a society that was telling me that being short, a short little cripple was as far from attractive as you could get. So I couldn't live in the body that I had at the time that actually was, for me, like a more physically attractive body than the one I have now. And I look back with regret. And that's another one following me around. The body that I didn't even see that was there. So I'm really interested in this. I'm really interested in this problem of if I do a self-portrait or I do a portrait of someone else, either way, is it my real body? Is it their real body? So this piece in particular, I was thinking about some stuff could come up around my family. Shock, everyone is like, what, family issues? And I was somewhere and I saw a big heavy satin dress that it doesn't look like my mother's wedding dress, but it has something about it, reminded me of my mother's wedding dress. And so I bought this and I took it home and I thought about the fact that my mother's wedding dress was worn by my sister-in-law. I was told that I was never going to have a relationship, have children, be with anyone. I'd always be alone. The disabled people weren't qualified for families or relationships. And so all of my mother's things were given to my brothers, even things that I knew for a fact that she wanted me to have. They went to my brothers. And so my sister-in-law wore my mother's wedding gown when my brother got married. And so it's hers. And so I was thinking about, I did end up getting married to a woman, but at the time it wasn't legal. And I didn't ask to wear my mother's wedding gown because my mother was much taller than me. And I just kept thinking that I would have butchered the gown, that so much of that beautiful satin, so much of that beautiful gown would have just been lost. And it felt like my mother's original body, and I couldn't kill her body, her young body. If someone else was going to, it wasn't going to be me. So I got this dress and I put it on backwards. It would never have fit me. This dress was not anything I could ever have worn. So I was doing a wedding waltz with someone else's wedding gown. So it was clearly a wedding gown, this thing.
Yeah,
it's right over there in my cedar chest. I kept it.
It's a really poignant piece, and there's something about your face in terms of that looking over the shoulder, that gesture, having the meaning of looking in the past. But there's also a sense of appraisal that on your part that's somewhat ambiguous. That is both like, this is not meant for me, or I do not want this. So there is an equal part. Yeah, and for a viewer, from my perspective, of sort of looking at it, I think of someone looking at this with a bit of a cool stare, a bit of a cool hard look about maybe this is not for me. And I want to move to the next set of slides too, as we're talking about this relationship to the idea of appraisal and about looking. That earlier quote of yours about, that encounter with each other's bodies is the story that we read each other, we tell each other a certain bit about, or we extrapolate a certain bit of information from each other. And you've talked about that and some of the links in the writing as well too, about the idea of the stare, how it is a sort of feral response. It is something hardwired to us, but it's also a social response. And you do make some distinctions between them, give allowances, and then also critique it at the same time. Now, these two were part of the original Circle stories, correct? Eli and Teki and you had you write about an encounter in the earlier part of the 90s, like about 95, where you were working and sort of getting involved with disability community, about a reappraisal and of what it meant to be disabled personally. And you talk about how it changed your, it was a revelation. And you use 3 words, and it comes up in a couple of different writings: unexpected, charming, exciting. And these are words that immediately, they're not about they're not political, they're not declarations, they're emotional words. And I really loved that string of words as a way to talk about the body. Unexpected, charming, exciting, placing the person in the emotional realm. So with your work, with when you're doing portraiture, you're dealing with people within the disability community, friends, advocates, family, people who are not disabled. All of this, the subject within your work, dwells within the emotion, within the human. But yet you carry these metaphorical relationships along with them as well too, which we'll talk a little bit about some of the bodies of work. So, so what is my question to you? My question
I don't know. I'm just waiting.
I'm just actually, my question is around this idea about, well, one of it is because in that same writing, you can then go on to talk about beauty and about reproducing what gives us pleasure. So I want to talk about pleasure and beauty, or have you talked about pleasure and beauty?
Well, where to start? So one of the things I've talked about, particularly with the portrait of Teki, which is where I first ran into this, was, so I started doing these portraits to back up. When I was a young adult, I absolutely was beyond miserable about being disabled. I hated myself. I literally, if you could see my prescription, I don't know. See, it's a very bad prescription. And if I take it off, there's not a lot out there except interesting color shapes. And I used to take off my glasses all the time when I went outside because I couldn't stand seeing myself reflected in windows or in mirrors in stores. I was in a continuous state of self-hatred. And so when I was in my late 30s, Susan Nussbaum, the writer, playwright, actress, invited me to this organization, to join this group called the Disabled Artists Coalition, collective rather. And I said no. I'd been in a lot of artist groups before and they were all miserable and self-pitying and, queer groups and lesbian groups and Jewish groups and Cincinnati groups, and just, they all boiled down to, we're all brilliant and no one appreciates us and yeah, sure, whatever. Anyway, so I thought it was going to be like that. I thought it was going to be a lot of disabled people just kind of being like, we're so, we're so abject. And instead, the group was really funny. They were really smart and they were really sarcastic and they were doing very innovative work. And I was shocked. And they also were very political. And they taught me about disability politics and disability culture and the beginning of sort of formal disability aesthetics. And it was not in any way, shape, or form a poor us group. It was quite the opposite. So I fell in love with the people in this group. Like, they gave my life completely different context. And talk about charmed. I mean, I was just enthralled. So I started doing their portraits, and to do them, I interviewed people about their work. I interviewed about their lives too, but mostly about their work, because I wanted, and I'm still interested in how people's bodies intersect with what they produce, and how we can see someone's body in the production of the work, including work that no one thinks of as relationships to embodiment. So these portraits, as with these two, were not portraits of abject pain or suffering, or, you know, they're, with Eli, it was about the fact that Eli was undergoing gender transition. And with Teki, it was literally taken from one of her quite wonderful solo shows, where she embodies something like 12 different characters, and a lounge singer, and a nun, and a country western singer, and a psychiatrist, and like, it's just a terrific piece. So I started showing this work, and just the fact of a wheelchair or a crutch or a visible impairment back then made the viewers just completely, immediately go into this place of, oh, how tragic, this poor person. I realized that there's a thing where I came up with something called pain reading. What a pain reading is, and it's not remotely just about disability. It's, I think it undergirds a lot of narratives around Black identity too, and certain other identities. But the basic idea is that the privileged audience assumes that if you are disabled or queer or Black or poor, or, you know, these different, that it's in various degrees a state of terrible suffering, that defines your life, that to be this person is to be in a state of social pain, and, you know, devalued and despised and unrecognized, and fill in, you know, it varies depending on what the identity is. And that if you depict this person in a positive way, it's compensatory, that you're covering over, like happiness or any other emotion other than pain is covering over the real truth of the subject's suffering. And so, like when I showed Teki, and Teki is this incredibly warm, funny, lovely person, very friendly. I had somebody look straight at me. Well, a bunch of people thought she was me, because we were both short. You know, it's how observant they were. The people would look right at me and say, but she looks so happy. Isn't she a dwarf? As if like being a little person meant that you could never be happy. And so I started thinking about what I saw in the bodies of these people. And in all my portraits, I really reject flattery. Like, the beauty I see has to be drawn from the actual body of the person. So I thought, what is it about their bodies? And it really came down to, and still comes down to, when you're different, most of the time, you are very aware of your body. You don't get to, I'll talk more about this a little later, but you don't get to forget who you are for 1 minute. You will always be reminded. And so most of the people I know who are in that state, they know how their bodies operate. They know what they look like. They know what their bodies need. They know how to live in their bodies with extreme consciousness. And it's that consciousness that for me makes the human body the definition of humanity elastic. And like somebody like Teki or Eli, in the fact that they are in bodies that have traditionally been despised. I mean, you guys in the audience are probably too young to even remember when being queer was just, you know, you could end up in jail easily. You know, you could lose your job. I mean, still there's plenty of places where you can lose your job, but you were, you know, thrown out of your family. You're just utter pariah. And then if you were trans, forget it. Just forget it. You were beyond the pale. And so the people who I knew who were making work were doing it by being intensely embodied. And that's what beauty is for me, is people who occupy their bodies in a state of claiming and awareness and creativity. Like the act of being in their bodies is a creative state. So that's a long answer, but that's
No,
the
well,
background to my work.
and I think it kind of moves into, like, these are two examples from the totems and familiars group of work too, which extend, I mean, your work keeps sort of extending or digging deeper into some of these, you know, I sort of refer to as sort of metaphorical realms or existential realms. And you'd said something earlier about your subjects knowing how their bodies operate and what they need, and also what they desire. Your totem and familiar was about this, asking people about what is that metaphorical relationship they have with something in the world that brings them solace or comfort or strength at a time when they feel under pressure.
Yes.
And this idea about, you're saying about the markers of disability, whether they're shown or not, and what that stands for. I mean, with Nomi Lamb, for example, it's this extraordinarily active, incredible place. And that is real and not. I don't know. I mean, I want to. So again, this is, and then you move that forward in the mirror shards, which I think is like the next two that are coming up. So I want to go back to you about this idea of, like with totems and familiars, about knowing what you need, what you want, but also what you desire. Where you go to, you know, where you pull the comfort and strength from, how that, you know, do you have anything you want to say about that, or should we just go to the next images?
No, not really.
Okay, but because what I really also love was this next, that body work that you refer to as mirror shards, which extend, I think, even deeper, that relationship with what brings us strength. But then the mirror shards, I sort of saw that as that idea of that reflection of that discontinuous or broken relationship to the natural world. And it's an acknowledgement of the feral, of us as humans, as animals, and also then how we either pull from or relate to or engage with the natural world. What brought, where did the mirror shards come from for you, or that concept? What were you looking at or thinking about that sparked that that investigation?
Well, there are a few things. I've always been obsessed with animals. I used to run a pet portrait business. I worked in a zoo. I took a lot of animal behavior classes in college, like just various things. I've used animals in my work for a long time, and I had a dog for almost 16 years who died right before this series. And with her, she had been trained to be my service dog, and then she went blind when she was 8. So she spent half of her life first going blind and then completely blind. And so was thinking about a bunch of things. One was that I'd always known that animals were individuals, but getting to be very close to my dog and paying attention to the way that she was different from other dogs, and also having done the portrait business. And I was thinking about the way that we understand that our pets are individuals, but we're perfectly happy to look at all other animals as interchangeable parts. You know, I was just hanging out with a writer the other day, and we were sitting by the lake, and there was a bunch of geese and ducks. And I was saying, you know, I'm sure that every goose here is slightly different from every other goose, and they have relationships within this flock. And, you know, the ducks have relationships, but I'm looking at them and all I see are ducks and geese, you know, group, and I don't know them. And so as long as I don't know them, I'm theoretically perfectly happy with losing them, like, because they're all interchangeable. And it's not until we've almost killed off a species that we care about there being individual members of that species, right? The last few movement, fill in the blank. And, you know, here's some animals in a zoo that we're trying to get to breed. And so we get to know those animals really, really well, because it's the only way we know how to get them to breed, right? So one thing was thinking about how hard it is to hold that knowledge in your head, that whenever you see something alive, and they've done studies that apparently even bees and bees, I think it's the only one I know of the insect studies, have individual entity relationships within the hive, and that bees can recognize each other's faces. And like, if you try and hold in your mind the idea that every animal you see, every living thing that you've ever seen is an individual, like, just hold that in your head for a minute, and that it matters when one of them is lost. Like, the human mind can't do it. So I was thinking about this problem of the individual, and that it obviously extends to humans. You know, when they say humanize something, what they really mean is make us see X individual as an individual, not to humanize, but to individualize is what is really going on. So that was part of it. And then the other part was that really, this is all about empathy. And when I've been thinking about empathy, I started thinking about kids' books. And that when we start to read, most of our books have animal stories, right? It's all full of talking animals, and animals in little clothing, and animals in houses, or animals, you know, and they're all impossible, right? All of these kids' books, every single one of them is full of impossible creatures. But as soon as we're taught as a little tiny child to accept this impossible, and also to identify, so like a little boy and a little girl, I think, have more possibility of an immediate identification with a little hedgehog that's talking than a little human who doesn't look like them, right? Our entry into empathy is through impossible relationships, impossible animals. And then we start to learn from there to identify with people. But language itself is based on metaphor. And what a metaphor does, what a symbol does, is that it forces us to make this. So like if we say, brave as a lion, we're first off turning a lion into a symbol for a human attribute. We're making that lion impossible because we're saying that we're like that lion and that lion is like us. And then we're generalizing something about humanity through making the animal, the natural world, be our mirror. So we've always looked to the natural world to understand ourselves, to like create all these metaphors and symbols. And then the metaphors and symbols become these mirrors through which we understand what it means to be human. So I was thinking about lions in particular, and I thought, okay, so what if we kill off all the lions? Does the meaning of lion change forever? So like, is the meaning of a dragon and a lion different? Because a dragon is a amalgam of animals. A dragon is an entity that we cobble together a lot of different qualities to make this entity that we can step into and then aspire to be, because there's no one animal that we think embodies all of this. So we're never going to lose dragons because dragons are imaginary. But what happens to bravery, or the idea of the pride, or the idea of collective, like animal collective? Still love that band. If we kill off all the animals, so that all of our symbols become lost, all of our animal relationships become imaginary. So I started to ask people to tell me, we started with my asking them what they thought their dominant quality was as a person. I didn't ask them about animals first. I asked them to tell me what they thought their, in a couple words, what was their most important quality. And then we worked backwards from there and said, okay, what animals symbolize that? And then I put them in imaginary costumes so that they were embodying the quality of this animal that would express their inner self as a kind of shamanistic, like the shaman puts on the skin of the animal in order to become that creature. I know all my answers are really long, but all of these projects have to do with a lot of conceptual working through. So the one I'd like to talk about briefly, because my work has evolved to be about ethics. Right. A lot of it is about ethics. And so this piece on the right, I guess it's on your right.
Yeah. Tim
Owl.
Yeah.
So that piece is, it started me down this particular road. Two pieces did. The portrait of Alison Bechdel, which is, I don't know if that's queued up, but it stayed.
Yeah, that's at the end. Yeah.
So Tim Lowley is one of my best friends, and he is a painter you guys absolutely need to know. He's brilliant. Doug, you have to teach him about Tim Lowley. Mm-hmm. Okay. And a lot of Tim's work is about his daughter. So Tim is very religious, in a kind of progressive. Do you know the denomination? I'm bad at Christianity.
You and me both.
It's, I believe, a Calvinist, somewhere in the Calvinist tradition.
Yeah, yes.
But very progressive, very open church. And his wife is a reverend in that church, and they both went to Wheaton again, or he went to Calvin, anyway. And for me, they enact their Christianity in a way that I wish I saw more people of faith do. Like, I wish more Jews enacted their Judaism the way that Tim and Sherry do. And their daughter, Tema, when she was a couple days old, she had a massive stroke. And she ended up with the inability to speak or to move voluntarily. She's cortically blind and has no voluntary communication other than sort of non-structured utterances. And they were told right from the beginning to institutionalize her. And my parents were told to institutionalize me. And they kept Tema. Her name is Tema. And she's now in her 30s. And the only reason she's alive is because Tim and Sherry have set up a collaborative home. People live with them in a kind of extended, what do you call, like there's a word for not.
Yeah, kind of communal, extended relationship.
Intentional
Yes, intentional
community. And everyone takes, is involved in the caretaking of Tema. And most of Tim's work has been paintings and sculpture and drawings of Tema and what it means to love someone who can never reflect love back in the way that we think love should look like. Tema will never say that she loves her parents. She'll never hug or kiss them. She'll never do any of the things that we're told we want from our children. But Tim and Sherry both believe that being alive, being a human, an individual, qualifies you for as much love as everyone should have. But I wanted to do Tim's portrait, and Tim wanted me to do a portrait of him and Tema together. And my work is based on an informed consent, which means that because the people I work with have gone through immense stigmatization, I give them a lot of control. And all the images that you see are me asking people how they want to be seen. Like I do thumbnails, and we go through photo shoots, like we go through so much so that the people have control all the way through the process about how they're going to be depicted. And Tema can't give me consent. And so I told Tim that I couldn't do a portrait of Tema. But then I said, well, look, if you want to be part of Mirror Shards, maybe what we can do is do a portrait of your relationship. And so Tim chose Owl, and he didn't even think about it at the time. I don't even remember why he said he chose it. But I thought, well, Tema is the source of his wisdom. Like his growth as a human, his understanding of what it means to be human, of what it means to love, is entirely through trying to embody Tema. He's always tried to understand what it means to be Tema. What does she understand of the world? What does she experience? And so I made this owl into Tema. I took her face and the way that she lays on his lap, and I abstracted it. And I made, it's a little hard to see, but he's actually wearing Tema. She strapped his arm the way that Jews put on phylacteries. So Jews wrap these things around their arms when they're in synagogue. So I made Tema as a phylactery. And so it's both a pietà and an embodiment. So that's, again, an incredibly long answer, but there's just a lot that's going into any of these.
Yeah. Well, thank you for going in, because I wanted to address that too. And it brings us also to the idea of the risk pictures as well too, this relationship you have with your model, with the subject, however you want to refer. Even model sounds impersonal. And I know you have—
I use collaborator.
Collaborator, yeah, thank you. And you've written and talked quite extensively about that relationship of the traditional model in art history and what that represents in terms of power. And the risk pictures was a continuation of this collaboration, but you added an additional, your risk, I guess, was what you invite them to come into the piece and work on it themselves. Do you want to talk a little bit about that process and that extension of that relationship?
So it always bothered me that even though I was trying to give people as much control as I knew how to, that in the end, I was the one making the piece and all the marks were mine and all the decisions were mine. And it bugged me. And also that's the traditional relationship of the artist and the model, is that the model submits and the artist is the one looking, and we never think about the fact that the model is looking back. And unless it's a commission where the commissioning agent is dictating what they want, whoever is being depicted by the artist is at the mercy of the artist. And I know from experience that when somebody sees, I mean, just think about when you've seen a photograph, much less a painting or drawing somebody else did of you, and how you felt about it, and how it felt to have a good picture or a bad picture, and whether you felt injured by the photographer or whoever was depicting you. So I started to try and think about how to equalize that relationship. So now what I do, this is on hold right now because of the pandemic, unfortunately, very unfortunately. But for the last 4 years, I've been doing this thing where rather than setting anything up ahead of time, somebody agrees to sit for me. And then, are we almost out of time?
We're getting close, so yeah.
I'll go fast.
Okay.
So somebody agrees to sit for me. We don't set up any kind of pre-image. They just come and either sit on my couch or sit on a chair or something. And I start drawing them. And each sitting is, they have to commit to at least 5 sittings. And at each sitting, it's 3 hours long. And at the 2-hour mark, I walk out of my house. And I give them 2 things. One is total permission to do whatever they want in my house. Like they can steal stuff, they can eat my food, they can sleep in my bed, they can go on my computer, they can go ransack my stuff. I will never ask what they did. I'll never ask if they took something, like whatever happens, it's totally about trust. But in exchange, they have to alter their portrait while I'm gone. And so we do this at least 5 times until the piece is completed. And so in each case, people have changed their portraits. And I can't cover it over, I can't erase it. I can only respond to what they did. So all the risk pictures are literal collaborations on paper.
Right. Which and all these can be seen on Riva's website as well too. I just picked out my favorite, so or the ones that stuck out for me. So yeah, and we are at that like 4-minute mark. So
here's some images, and I'll shut up for a minute.
I had these 2 images for you. The last thing I wanted to ask you, and 2 minutes or less, is you refer to socially challenged body, just that phrase. And how do you land on the language that you use? And to me, socially challenged body, just I see it as it doesn't put the pressure on the physical body, it puts the pressure on society.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I don't want to use language that infreaks anybody, and the problems are not with the person's body. It's always with how that body is treated in the world. And I just wrote a memoir, and a big chunk of it is about how surgery is used. Like a lot of the surgeries I've had, they divide between surgeries that saved my life or saved a function, kept me from being paralyzed. But then a lot of them were surgeries I had as a kid that were pressure to make me look different, make me walk different. And most of them failed, but they screwed up my body in the process. And so I've been thinking a lot about how even surgeries that look like they're functional, a lot of them come down to, will society accept you if you choose not to fix this particular thing? And because the parameters are so narrow, it can be not so obvious when that pressure is coming to bear. So yeah, socially challenged, you know, race and sexuality and morphology and whether you have the money to look a particular way. I mean, it's all about not whether you are comfortable in your body, but whether you're constantly, to go back to the beginning, being squeezed out of it by the hatred of others.
Thank you. I think with that, I'm going to say, Riva, thank you so much for joining us and answering these questions kind of on the fly.
I'm sorry, I should have kept better eye on it.
I know.
I'm happy to go over if people want to ask questions in the audience.
Yeah, well, I don't know if there are questions. I also want to say that you are going to, so do we have any questions, Riva, or I mean, Laura or Natasha?
I didn't see any questions come through on the chat, but I just gave everyone the ability to unmute themselves if you'd like to ask a question now.
Perfectly happy to answer. Or you can all be released into the wild.
Because you can also catch Riva this Friday, because you're doing an interview or talk with Terry Myers, Humana. So this is your warm-up for what I think is going to be a really fantastic conversation with a professional.
Oh, like you're not? I mean,
I don't know. He's the big, you know.
You know Terry?
I could listen to you for hours.
Well, he's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I may ask a question, Riva, I noticed that as an artist, you have earrings with rodent skulls, with a rodent skull on each one.
Yeah.
Are you into taxidermy?
I love taxidermy. I tragically don't own any, but I hope someday. I do have behind me. I have. I teach anatomy, so I've got reproduction. Cat skeleton, and out there in the corner, here's my living room. Where is he? In the far corner there is Norbert, my teaching assistant, who goes by the official name of Bucky the Budget Skeleton. And then in the other room, I have actual human skulls in skull boxes. Why do you ask?
I'm into taxidermy too, and I plan to I work with anatomy, and I plan to do research on prehistoric animals such as the dinosaurs and what came before and after them one of these days.
Are you here in Chicago?
I'm in Downers Grove.
Well, if you come into town, you should go to the Woolly Mammoth, which is a shop in Andersonville. I think they're open. And it's full of taxidermy, and they're extremely knowledgeable. And they do at times have fossil items, but it's like a tiny, tiny shop. It's just full of bizarre objects and taxidermy. And, you know, I keep saying if I ever get married again, that's where I want to get married.
Yeah, what part of Chicago is Andersonville in?
Andersonville is north side, just the next area up is Rogers Park, so it's almost at the border of Evanston.
It's on Foster between Ashland and Clark.
Exactly, Foster between Ashland.
Yes, the Middle East Bakery is right across the street, so it's a great
neighborhood. It's a really fun neighborhood.
Wow.
Other questions? I have talked you all into a stupor.
Hey, Riva. How are you?
Hi.
I am curious. You know, some of us aren't in a position to have certain power or to have finances, but what are ways that we can support artists in a non kind of financial way?
Oh gosh. I mean,
what would add value to you or
to me particular, or to,
yeah.
Well, anything you can do to keep the art world going. So volunteering places, if finances are an issue, volunteering, you don't have to physically be somewhere. You could be on a, you know, help with fundraisers. You can donate artwork to auctions. You can tell your friends to go see things. You can make going to exhibits part of your social world. I have a show opening on the 10th at Zola Lieberman Gallery. Doug, did I tell you I'm with Zola now?
Yeah, you did. I saw that somewhere. Yes.
Yeah, so I have a show opening at Zola Lieberman Gallery.
Mhm.
It always makes artists happy to, I'm staring at a blank. Sorry, I can't see you, Cecilia. So I'll look back into the green dot. Hi, Cecilia. Showing up and also help, like I often need studio assistants. There's a lot I physically can't do, and my studio assistant just had a family tragedy and is in Massachusetts. So if you know any artists who need physical help doing stuff, that's really enormous.
Yeah.
You know, just
I think, yeah, keeping the arts in the conversation, you know, talk about the work you see, you know, and it's not like a precious commodity. It's actually a very essential part of who we are, human nature, but we sort of see it as a commodity when it really is an exchange of ideas, of emotion, of, you know, engagement in life.
I think that's actually the last point I want to make, which is that there's all, you know, when people talk about social change, they say, oh, art doesn't make change. Like, you know, going out and protesting does, and giving money does, and voting does. And yes, that's true. But what art is to me, anything that's really important in the world, whether it's civil rights or climate change or health and, you know, right to health care, whatever it is, it touches everything, right? It touches your family, it touches your job, it touches where you're gonna live, it touches how you vote, it touches what kind of income you're gonna have. It's everything, right? Your anxieties, your hopes, anything big is just totally interwoven with every aspect. And what art lets you do is think through that stuff. Art is like, it's like an arena you can step into and figure out what it is you feel and what you think. And that includes writing and performance and visual art and music, like all these things open you up to let you figure out what your values really are and what your beliefs really are. Art does a lot of other things too, but anything that addresses the big issues in our world, we have to be able to think about it with our whole mind. And I can't imagine thinking through anything crucial without the artists that I know who have like opened up what I know about what it means to try and make it a better world. That's my last rant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Riva.
You be safe, okay? Doug, you know, if you wanna let them know upcoming, I sent you my schedule of insanity for the next month, right?
No, I haven't, but I'm sure if you
I'll
if
make
you'd
sure.
like to, yeah, please, yeah. But definitely just there was a link in the chat to Riva's publisher where you can pre-order the book. That's one of the things you can do to support and start a book club. You know, read it, share it with your friends, and go to her website, look at the videos that are in the chat, and join us, or join her, not me, I'll be watching, but Friday when you talk to Terry Meyer through Mana, that's also in the link as well too. But again, thank you, Riva. Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you so much.
Everyone who came. Yeah.
Natasha and Laura, thank you for making this possible.
All right.